What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 39, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by Corbettgames. Corbett, how are you doing tonight, dude?
Feels good to be right, Meowth. It feels good to have 100% accuracy as a predictor of card power level, to never have been wrong in my entire life, and to be here right now with you to brag about that. I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
I told everybody that you were going to do this, and you did not disappoint. Goodness gracious. Yeah, we'll talk about what Corbett's talking about.
I could never disappoint. I have to give the people what they want. You know?
That's true. We'll talk about what Corbett's talking about in a little bit. We've got tons to talk about today because we had a brand new expansion come out on Tuesday. We're going to be talking about our impressions, cards, decks, all that kind of good stuff. But before we dive into all that, just a reminder to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys enjoy our content, it does support us a ton. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's talk about our initial impressions of the Wild metagame post-expansion. Totally didn't walk into that one. So the format, I think, has definitely shifted. Would you say that? The meta has definitely changed with Forged in the Barrens plus the unnerfs, like, finally all coming together. People are getting what they want, man. The WoW metagame has changed. It has shifted. It is a new WoW format.
Yeah, it's a lot closer to what we had in, like, Skullomance, right? Compared to what we had at, like, Darkmoon. Mm-hmm. Where in Skullomance things went really kind of insane with Darkglare, and it's been a lot more like of a heavy upheaval like that right now.
Yeah, it's really, really exciting. So let's talk about some of the big decks that people are going to be talking about. And we have to start off with the one that might be the best deck in the format right now, Death and Taxes Paladin. So for those of you guys that don't know what Death and Taxes is, it's basically a term that we're coining from Magic, where the idea is you just tax your opponent a ton with stuff like Far Watchpost and Nerebar Weblord and Oh My Oggs and Never Surrenders, so that your opponent just can't do anything that they want to do in the early game. And while they're struggling to play cards, you're getting in there with all these little cheap minions that are getting buffed up by stuff like Seal of Champions, Hand of a Doll, Blessing of Kings, and you're just hitting your opponent in the face for a ton of damage, and you're killing the game before the game can really get started. So yeah, I mean, this deck has benefited from a couple of really important releases, right? So you have Far Watchpost, like we've been talking about. You have Conviction, basically the 1-mana Fireball, which is kind of stupid. We'll talk about that one as well. Sword of the Fallen, another extremely strong card. And then there's also this card that got unnerfed called Call to Arms, kind of an unknown entity rather. So yeah, dude, Death and Taxes Paladin, are we overreacting and saying that this actually currently in the first 5 days might be the best deck in the format?
No, I think it's pretty accurate. The win rate is, I think, like, people are becoming more aware of it, right? And they're like, the meta is very much shifted dramatically, I think, at least from what I've seen, where people are very focused on Death and Taxes or very aware of it. I personally am seeing, like, a lot fewer Darkglare Warlocks and Secret Mages and things like that. There's a much more heavier focus on it. So yeah, it's been weird, to be honest. Like, it's been so long of playing into a lot of the same decks that here along, comes this building, and the secrets in Paladin and everything's kind of shifted. So yeah, the deck looks really, really powerful. I think it's definitely the early front runner and the deck to beat and the deck to, like, most keep in mind. But we'll see how things pan out.
It's so crazy to me, the stupid building is all it took to displace Darkglare and Secret Mage. Like, the stupid building that Corbett totally called coming. It's so annoying, dude. Do you know the win rate of a coin Watchpost on turn 1 in Wild?
So it's not actually that high, the coin Watchpost play, from what I can see. Like, it's still, like, well over 50%, right? But that's kind of like what the deck win rate is. Mm-hmm. And again, I can't really filter for just Paladin for here. So yeah, not actually that exciting.
Not that exciting. All right. Well, I will tell you from personal experience, Coin Tower on 1 is very, very, very annoying. As somebody who's playing another aggressive deck, especially, right? It's a lot harder to react and come back onto the board once they're taxing everything and you're just really, really slow, which is kind of what the deck is all about. But let's talk about some of the other cards, right? Outside of Watchpost, Conviction and Sword of the Fallen. So these are some new cards from the brand new set that are actually just kind of insane, I think, in general, but it also just kind of works really, 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 really well with what this deck is trying to do.
Yeah, the Sword of the Fallen is pretty nutty, right? It's way, I mean, I'll just call it, it's like way too powerful. Like, they'll fix it. It'll be a nerf target, I think. We'll talk about that in a bit. But right now it's kind of it's really like that, the sword and this Oh My Yogg and Call to Arms, all everything's sort of like bundled together, right? And then just like all synergistically popped up at the exact same time, it feels like. And it's kind of crazy, the Web Lord and the Watch Post working in tandem to just sort of completely be disruptive. And then like Oh My Yogg stopping the spells. And a lot of decks just get completely shut out. And then Crab Rider by itself, you know, like Crab Rider again working super well with all these Paladin buffs. It's just like it's such a weird deck, the way like all the pieces sort of come together.
Yeah.
But what it's been so far has been very, very impressive.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the cards individually before this expansion were like laughing stocks, right? Like Web Lords were just like, you know, for the longest time. I mean, I guess like the last like 5 or 6 months, maybe not so much as Dark Lair has popped up, but people kind of just like, Web Lord, what the hell is this card? Why would I play it? You know, and now Web Lord's like one of the MVPs of the format right now, which is kind of insane to me. And obviously like Crab Rider just kind of broken. It's so insane. But yeah, I mean, what are your general feels about this deck as you know, existing in the format? Because I know I've heard a lot of mixed feelings about it from the community.
I don't really like it, to be honest. Like it's a bit. I mean, it's funny you say like it's a mixed response from the community. It's mixed for just me personally. Like as one person, I have a bit of a mixed feeling about it. Where a rapid shakeup of the meta is refreshing and novel, and that's good. But I think the play experience that it creates is pretty hostile a lot of the time. You know, interaction in Hearthstone is something that's very hard to get right, and most of the time, interaction feels kind of gross and bad. Like a lot of the time in Hearthstone, you don't actually want interaction, because it's more of a game about more. It's more of a game where you just kind of want to do your thing and you kind of want to interact a little bit with the board. But when there's heavy disruption via like Dirty Rat or now like with Watch Post or things like that, a lot of that can be a little bit unfun. And so I don't think the deck is like the most fun thing in the format, right? Like your cards cost more and you can't play cards. Like that's not like exactly riveting gameplay a lot of the time. But at the same time, it is causing a pretty dramatic shift, and it's causing a lot of decks that were previously very powerful to get pushed out. And so that part's kind of interesting by itself.
So this might be a little bit of a hot take, ignoring the fact that it kind of shifted the metagame, right? I think the fact that this kind of deck exists is good for the format, or like in general, just because people complain about like the lack of interactivity in general, and I think being able to interact with your opponents is a good thing. And like taxing and disrupting your opponent's game plan is a very, very powerful thing. Yeah, it's not very fun, but like it's one of the few ways that you have to interact with your opponent in Hearthstone, right? Taxing their effects, stuff like Loathebs and Dirty Rats and stuff like that. And so I'm okay with this deck being a thing. Yeah, it's not very fun to play, and like I get that. There are a lot of decks that are not very fun to play, especially when you're on the receiving end of it. But I'm actually a big fan. It's one of the few ways that you have, especially in our format in Wild, to actually like interact with your opponent, like, and disrupt their game plan. Normally it's just like, oh, I'm gonna pray that I hit the Dirty Rat against the combo deck, or I hope I hit the Loatheb as the aggro deck, right, against the combos or the Arena Priest. And this way, like, it's just another way, and I think it's a very, I don't want to say fair, because the whole point is that it's unfair for the opponent to play their cards, but I mean, it's a 2/4 body, right? Like, it technically can be interacted with, right, because it has to be on the board. And so I think Death and Taxes Paladin is a lot less egregious than something like Dirty Rat or Loatheb. And so like, I'm okay with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the Watch Post is sort of like the fun thing to joke about, like in terms of like talking about why this deck is the thing. But it's probably like the third like headline, pretty much, right? It's the headline number one is like Call to Arms got buffed. Next like point is that the sword is completely busted, and then everything else is sort of trivial. Like if they got rid of Watch Post but didn't touch those other cards, I think the deck would be completely fine.
Yeah,
they just changed it slightly. But the Watch Post being in this list is pretty gold.
Yeah, I really do enjoy the deck, and I hope it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, less for the sake of the metagame. Yes, I like the fact that the meta has shifted, but I also like the deck as a concept, and I really do hope that it sticks around. I know we got flamed last week for talking about Quest Rogue and the fact that it's like not very good, right? And so it might be okay to leave it untouched. And like if it's an unfun play experience, it shouldn't be in the game. Right. I disagree with that comment, and we talked about why last week. I think Death and Taxes Paladin is not nearly as egregious as something like Snip Snap Warlock or Dark Lair or like hell, even Big Priest when it comes to like play experience, in my opinion, personally. I guess comparing it to Big Priest might be something like that, where like you just don't really get to play the game sometimes. But it's the fact that Big Priest and stuff like that exists. Like Death and Taxes Paladin kind of just fits right in our format.
Yeah, I mean, we're playing wild, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you're not doing something that feels unfun for your opponent and is sort of disgusting, then you're not really playing wild in the first place.
Yeah, why are you here?
It fits in fine, right? Like, every deck has those moments where you're like, ugh, like that was just that was gross, and you know that's kind of what Death and Taxes is. So it is also, you know, just being aware of that, I think.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt that it's also one of my favorite Magic archetypes, so it's fun to actually be able to play it in Hearthstone. Yeah, I love doing the taxing effects. Like, I love playing the control that doesn't allow the opponents to do things. It's kind of fun. So, all right, let's move on to our next deck. You want to take it away with your, you termed it Miracle Mage, I think?
Yeah, we'll do Miracle Mage. I think Miracle Mage is good because it's sort of just, you know, it brings both the Mizaki and Flamewaker because they're basically the same deck in a lot of ways. They just sort of like have two little sub archetypes. But yeah, Miracle Mages. So Miracle Mage being, you know, you play Luna, Apprentice, and, you know, you draw a whole bunch of spells and then you kill your opponent. You cheat a ton of mana and you kill your opponent. You try to survive and freeze the board and things like that, and then you kill your opponent. So Miracle Mage is,
I'm sensing,
you know, it's been a lot of fun for me. Yeah, it's got a very cool play pattern. But no, whether you're doing like 10 damage with Frostbolts with Mizaki, or you're doing like a billion pings in one turn with Flamewaker, it's been a lot of fun for me to play. You know, the deck picked up refreshing mana. Refreshing spring water. Refreshing spring water. That's the one. Yeah. It got that, which is like a gain 2 mana, draw 2 cards. Pretty good.
Who could have seen that being a problem?
Yeah, pretty good card. And so yeah, it's sort of just the evolution of Quest Mage in a lot of ways. It's sort of like the end game, I think, for that so far. It's an extension as well of like the previous Mizaki Mage in Standard. And the Flamewaker version is sort of just like a branching off that, right? Where people took the Mizaki list in Standard, they applied it to Wild, and then it's like, hey, what if instead of waiting to kill people with Mizaki, we just did it with Flamewaker? And so I really like the Flamewaker variant of Miracle Mage a ton.
So what's the advantages of like Flamewaker for Mizaki for the people that don't know?
Yeah, so Mizaki Mage, you're not cutting, so you're not running the Flamewaker package, right? And so your damage that you can do is often a lot more, like, let's say straightforward, right? Where you stall, you have like things like Frost Nova, which the Flamewaker build doesn't tend to play. And so you have a lot more like freezing, and then you pop off with Mizaki and you have like Bolt Head, Lance Head, GG. Whereas the Flamewaker Mage, the advantage of the Flamewaker is that those pieces can be used a lot earlier against aggressive decks.
Yeah. So
like Flamewaker can sort of like clean up a token board, and if it sticks against like pirates or odd pally, then you kind of just win. So you get to just like have a little bit more flexibility, I think, with your combos. It makes you worse into things like your Glare, for example. Like Glare really hates the Frost Nova that the Mizaki build has, and so that's some of the advantage. But ultimately, they're pretty similar in terms of like matchup spread.
Yeah, cool. Now that we've got all the serious talk out of the way, can I talk about how much I hate this deck? We were talking about Death and Taxes Paladin. I hate this deck, dude. I have been complaining about Sorcerer's Apprentice for what feels like 4 years now, and how stupid of a card it is, and how you should not be able to play cards for 0 mana. And oh my god, dude, this is like everything I hated about Quest Mage, man. Yeah, it's so disgusting.
We're not playing cards for 0 mana, dude. We're gaining mana for playing
even
cards.
Even better. Dude, the fact they printed like a 2 mana Emperor Thorson for your entire deck that you can run 2 of. And then you have Sorcerer's Apprentice to discount things even further. It's so disgusting, dude. And I totally didn't get scammed by it a couple times right before I started streaming. That's totally not why I'm complaining about it now, but it's...
my experience was opposite. I almost hit rank 1 with it just for a couple, the hours before we started doing this. So I'm having a great time. with it. I think it's fantastic. But no, it's very solitary and toxic. Yeah. Very fun to play if you're the one doing the toxic solitaire things. I think the deck is super, super like fancy. It's so fancy, the plays that you can do, and it's very I think it's very, very cool and creates a completely miserable experience for your opponent. which is the exact type of deck that I like.
So, like, it's so hard to interact with this deck, right? Which is, like, why I like Death and Taxes Paladin, because it's, like, in theory, very good against this deck, because you have stuff like the Watch Post and everything. I hate this deck, dude. We'll talk about some nerfs later in the show, but I really hope that they touch something. Like, why do you have a 2-mana card that gains you 2 mana, draws you 2 cards, and can probably actually be cheaper than 2 mana? And so you gain like 3 or 4 mana. I just, like, why? Why does this card exist? And
yeah. I had one game earlier where I actually managed to cast 4 Incanter's Flows. And then I popped off.
How the hell did you even do that?
I drew both of them, and then like I got 2 of them off random RNG cards, off like Trick and Glyph. So yeah, it was fun.
Yeah. Can I pose something to you? Now that Sorcerer's Apprentice is finally wild specific, do you think they will kill the girl? Do you think they'll finally nerf Sorcerer's Apprentice? Ever?
I think now that Sorcerer's Apprentice is finally wild, I think there is now nearly 0 shot that they ever nerf it. I think it was much more likely to be a nerf candidate in Standard. And now that it's here in Wild, very unlikely. Incredibly unlikely that they ever nerf it.
I want to start a petition to kill the girl, but that sounds really, really long. Really, really wrong. But yeah. Alright, before I complain too much about this and people call me a whiner, let's move on to our next deck. Let's talk about some Murloc Shaman. So Murloc Shaman is a deck that I think both you and I were super high on. Coming into the expansion, because I think we're getting 9 to 11 new Murlocs in the deck. We got new buffs, new comeback mechanisms, just an insanely powerful legendary. And I think it's lived up to the hype. I think Murloc Shaman is a very good deck. I like on Tuesday when the expansion came out, I played a bunch of Murloc Shaman. It felt really, really strong. I haven't really touched it much since because I've been messing around with some other stuff. But my initial impression was that it felt like it could compete for tier 1. Right, it could be in that Death and Taxes, Dark Layers, Secret Mage kind of bracket of decks. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I think Murloc Shaman is a very, 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 very good deck.
Yeah, I can see it in that kind of range. Maybe a touch below, we'll see. But like definitely in that high tier kind of area, right? The win rate so far looks really, really good from what we've seen early. The list looks fine. Like there aren't any lagging pieces behind or anything. Like there's nothing that looks like it needs to be cut and changed immediately. The Theory Crafted list look good. So yeah, I don't know. Murloc Shaman looks fine. Like it's a strong deck. It got a whole bunch of new cards. They held up, pretty easy to build, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that I haven't seen more of it. That's the one comment I will make, is that Murloc Shaman is doing well right now. It's doing pretty damn well, and I'm really not seeing it like much at all. I thought it was going to be kind of everywhere, because it did have like, back when Murloc Shaman was a thing previously, it was actually pretty popular in certain like pockets and things like that. Certain time periods, it was actually a thing. But yeah, I haven't seen too much of it so far. Been a surprise.
Well, I mean, I guess how is the matchup into something like Death and Taxes Paladin for a Murloc Shaman? Because that might be one of the big factors in that.
I think Murloc Shaman is one of the actual best decks into Death and Taxes Paladin. I think
it makes even less sense that we're not seeing it.
Yeah, I think like Murloc Shaman is one of the decks that can kind of actually get under the Paladin, which is certainly one way to go about it. And if it ever hits if the 1/3 ever sticks, like the give your minions rush, like if you play that on 2 and the Paladin like doesn't have a response for it, it's very easy to sort of swing and keep going wide and get really strong board control. You're not really running a ton of spells either. You're only running everything and the new nothing. And so, if you can get under it before the Pally really gets to do stuff, I think you do fine. Like, it's probably not a strong, like a way favored matchup or anything, but I think it actually does pretty okay in that matchup. Yeah.
All right. So, moral of this story, you guys should be playing more Murloc Shaman. It's a very, very good deck. And if you're seeing a ton of Death and Taxes Paladin and you hate it, counter it with Murloc Shaman. It's a good deck. All right. Let's talk about Pirate Warrior. This is like the 15th different version of Pirate Warrior we've had, because cards keep getting nerfed and cards keep getting printed. Pirate Warrior, I mean, I think there's a couple of really big additions to talk about. The new 1 mana 2/1 Pirate from the core set is very, very powerful. Bloodsail Deckhand, I believe is her name. And then you have Fogsail Freebooter, 2 mana 2/2, deal 2 if you have a weapon. And then, of course, we have the brand new weapon, the Outrider's Axe, the 4 mana 3/3. Whenever you kill a minion with it, draw a card. I mean, I can't even forget. There's a new legendary, by the way, that happens to not be a pirate, so I think that's why. I know I definitely looked over it because it wasn't a pirate, but Rakara That card is busted. That card is so good. Just like Murloc Shaman, Pirate Warrior getting what 7 new cards now with the new expansion. Some of it is replacing stuff like Nitro Boost and Cutting Class, but like Pirate Warrior chugging along. Pirate Warrior was like a tier 1 deck, at the end of the last expansion, and it's chugging along, dude. It's still a very, 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 very good deck. I think it's again another one of those decks like Murloc Shaman, like this new Paladin deck, and like Odd Paladin that would be joining. I would say like Dark Lair and Secret Mage is like that. Those top tier decks.
Yeah, I think Pirate Warrior is one of the best decks right now. The Rakara I really didn't see coming. That's actually been a very fun switch up. Where, we're still getting like data and things like that, but just like in terms of feeling, in terms of like what it's felt like playing it and playing against it, it seemed very, very good. Yeah. I've been pretty impressed with Rakara. The build, even though we are running all these weapons and things like that, I think it's okay. Like I think the simple, always just run the good card seems to be working out fine. And so Pirate Warrior, I think it does okay to Pally. It's aggressive, so it does okay into mages. You have a bit more longevity now with the axe, so maybe you do okay again into priest a little bit better, maybe into things like Reno Priest. It's just like very well rounded. I think Pirate Warrior is like strong. So.
Yeah, I've had a lot of success with Pirate Warrior against the Death and Taxes Paladin because of the weapons, right? The weapons don't get taxed by the Web Lords, and so you can help clean up the board and set up for like a cannon pirate's turn that just counters the call to arms really, really well, right? Because there's a lot of 2 and 4 health minions off of the call. I think Pirate Warrior, before we were talking about this, I think Pirate Warrior, I was hesitating to put it as like the best deck just because it felt so goddamn strong when I was playing it into the metagame that I was facing. It felt so good.
Yeah, it's the deck that I've had the highest win rate with so far, like among like the decks that I've played a decent amount. I had a really, really good run with Pirate Warrior, so I've been impressed.
Yeah, Pirate Warrior looking good. So, I mean, we're talking about all these top tier decks, and it looks like the meta has shaken up. We've got Dark Lair Secret Mage, but we now have Death and Taxes Paladin. You have, I guess you still have Odd Paladin up there, and now you have Murloc Shaman and Pirate Warrior. I mean, I don't want to say tier 1 because I don't know what these tiers are, but that like upper echelon of decks seem very similar in power level, and they all seem really damn strong.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of options right now. Previously, there was like a lot of options that players had with the rogue decks as well. Towards the end, I think, particularly at higher ranks, it did start to get a little bit like play Glare or you're not playing the win. Like for a bit there, it felt like you just should be playing Dark Lair Warlock at the very highest levels and things like that. And that isn't necessarily how it feels right now. I think there are a lot of options, and I think another option that seems to be doing pretty well that you haven't mentioned is Hand Buff Paladin. Hand Buff Paladin is actually doing pretty good.
So Hand Buff Paladin getting a couple new cards with Samuro, some Chain Gangs potentially being unnerfed. We've got potentially the Runthak, I think is the 5-mana legendary with Rush. What are some of the
Knight of Anointment? Knight of Anointment getting Conviction. Getting Conviction, Hand of Adal. This gives like the deck a lot more burst, man. Crab Riders that are buffed up and then get hit by Conviction. It's so much damage like coming in from that deck. It's actually nutty.
Are you saying that Crab Rider and Conviction might be good cards?
Yeah, I don't think anyone else has noticed this in any other archetype. But yeah, a potentially powerful combo Conviction with Crab Riders, yes.
Yeah. I mean, Hand Buff Paladin, I think it's enough. This is one of those decks that is just like... It has Odd Rogue Syndrome, or like Odd Paladin Syndrome, where it's just like, nobody plays it for how good it is. It is... Every time I see it in High Legend, or every time I play against it, or I play it myself, the deck just seems kind of nuts. It seems so good. The ability to snowball, as well as the ability to come from behind, with like the ability to snowball with buffs and Wind Fury and Charge, and then you have the comeback mechanisms of stuff like Samuro and Broomstick and Crab Rider. It's kind of disgusting. Like the deck feels really, really good.
Yeah, Pally as a class is this like definitely the leader right now, I think. Where I think Paladin probably has like 4 or 5 decks that I could name off that are like really, really good. Whether it's Death Attacks, Hand Buff, Odd. I even think things like Even Paladin. No one's playing Even Paladin, and I think Even Paladin is probably quite strong right now, and no one is even giving it a shot. Because like, why would you? It's like the 5th Pally deck on the list.
Well, and like Libra Paladin, just straight up
Yeah,
like
Libram.
secrets. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a good time with Libram as well. Like, I had a good win rate with that. Like, that's another one that just seems fine. Like, a really good deck.
Yeah, Call to Arms. Call to Arms
Yeah.
saving the Paladin class. I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about classes that are, or at least decks that are kind of not so hot. Before the expansion, a lot of people were talking up Celestial Alignment Druid with the Giants. Yeah, I don't really know where to go with this because it's not very good. It's kind of a joke of a deck. The Celestial Alignment Giants.
A giant disappointment so far, the alignment deck.
Clapping that one up for that pun. I mean, but we're talking about the Giants themselves being pretty meh in this deck, but I know you were talking a little bit about some potential... You still laughing at your own joke? Oh my goodness.
A little bit. Sorry, go on.
All right. We were talking about Celestial Alignment being kind of a joke when it comes in combination of Giants, but you had some ideas. I think, I'm not sure who popularized this deck, but it was popping up a little bit on HS Replay, but kind of a Mali combo Druid that utilizes Celestial Alignment.
Yeah, it looks like there's a different take on Malygos Druid that's popping up. The sample is really, really small, but it uses like alignment and then ramp spells with both the Malygoses. Malygase? with the Malygase. And basically the idea is that you play alignment and then you ramp up with something like Nourish or, Bioproduct or some things like that. And you play the new Malygos to draw all your more ramp. And then you just keep ramping. You play Mali, you refresh all your mana with something like Kun or Omu. And then you kill them with, Malygos cards with spell damage. So there's kind of like different builds, I think. Like that could be maybe a fun way to go about a new take on Malygos, which like Malygos Druid has looked the exact same now. Basically the exact like 30 cards for a really long time. And so it'd be fun if we got an alignment version of that. That could be kind of cool. Yeah, a little bit similar to what they're doing in Standard, but we have both Malygos, so we can do fun things like that.
Yeah, I also think that there's potential. I know Standard is doing a lot of dumb stuff with Guardian Animals and Celestial Alignment. I haven't tested it myself, and I don't know if anybody's done it in our format, but it also seems like something might be there where you play alignment, you lock your opponent out, then you survival of the fittest plus Guardian Animals and just kind of do dumb things with dumb amounts of stats that they can't answer. And it's better than Giants because your minions have Rush, and you can do dumb things with that, right? You can actually recover the board. So yeah, I mean, I think there's potential when it comes to Celestial Alignment. It's just Giants are not the way to go. That deck looks like a joke when it comes to...
Yeah, it's trash. Yeah, complete trash. Yeah.
Speaking of a deck that's totally not trash, let's talk about the hero power stuff for Mage. Specifically, Even Mage. So Even Mage getting a couple of new cards, right? You get Wildfire, you have the Reckless Apprentice, and then you have like Mordresh. Those are kind of the highlights alongside Varden just being a pretty damn strong card. Even Mage actually looks like it has some potential in the format. It actually doesn't look like a meme.
Yeah, it looks like it's kind of on the borderline, right? Where it's like, it's not meme tier, like it's not an embarrassment, it's not like that competitive, but it's on the fringes, right? Like you can have some fun, you can win some games, you can do okay with Even Mage, which is weird. Like that is a weird thing to be thinking about. I don't even know all the names of the cards, to be honest. Like you were just reeling them off. I'm like, yeah, totally, I know what that means. That Mage card, sure. But if I describe it as like the 4-mana one that goes pew pew pew, I know what that means in my head. But yeah, Even Mage so far, it actually has held up well when I've played it. It does pretty good into like if it gets the Wildfire really early, it can actually hold off most aggro decks pretty decently well. Yep. It does struggle a little bit, I think, in applying enough pressure. And I think that the lack of life gain is also a bit of a small issue, right? Where like it can control board really well, but because it takes some hits in the early game, it can't recover as much. But at the same time, Even Mage is still doing like decently. Like it's not like the deck has to be high tier to be worthy of mentioning. And I think it's been fun.
On the border of meme and competitive is like where Handbuff Paladin saw itself a couple of expansions ago, right?
Once upon a time,
It's where the Mizaki Mage found itself a couple expansions ago. So yeah, I mean, especially if they are going to print more synergy, I'm really like, I've been playing a ton of this deck, ton of Even Mage, and a ton of, this is going to sound like a mouthful, but just trust me, this deck works. Luna's Pocket Galaxy, Reno Hero Power Mage. I had some games where I like brand Mordreshed with some Potion of Illusions, and it was absolutely disgusting. But I agree with you. It does feel like it has trouble closing out games with the deck. I've been messing around with like Ragnaros and Kodo Riders, and don't ask. I've been scouring the collection for some hidden gems. There's like the tournament medic, by the way, the 4-mana 1/8. Whenever you inspire, like heal 2, there's your life gain right there. Easy. But I agree with you. The deck's been a ton of fun to play. It's actually pretty competitive, and I think it has a ton of potential moving forward if they're going to continue to support it.
Yeah, I haven't seen any mention elsewhere of Luna's Pocket Galaxy Hero Power Reno Mage, but I'm assuming that's just because it won't fit in the 140 characters on Twitter, if I had to guess.
That's exactly why. But keep an eye out.
Yeah.
Totally going to sell out here. Totally YouTube video coming soon about that deck. It's sick.
Oh.
Yeah. Speaking of sick, Pillager Rogue, or I guess just all kinds of rogues that like to draw cards. I mean, we can lump Pillager Rogue with Miracle Rogue here, because Field Contact and Octobot are, also just as good as advertised. These cards are just kind of insane. 3-mana Gadgets and Auctioneer, 2-mana Emperor Thorson seems pretty good in a class that likes to have a lot of cards in hand. I know you've been playing a lot of the Miracle Rogue. I've been playing a lot of the Pillager Rogue. The Pillager Rogue loves the Octobot. It helps you recover tempo against aggro decks, as well as just combo off super quick. And then Field Contact with stuff like Miscreants and Foxies and Lackeys. It's just like, I had a game where a Secret Mage had the opportunity to trade into my 3/2 on turn 4. They didn't trade into my 3/2, and then I drew like 7 cards the next turn on turn 5.
Oh no!
As a Pillager Rogue, and won that game. It was kind of disgusting.
Yeah, I was having a really good time with Miracle Rogue, and then I saw my first Nerubar Weblord, and I kind of instant deleted. And I was like, "Well, that was a good run. We had 24 hours of that. That was fun." But yeah.
Yeah, I guess Weblords and Towers really do screw up the rogue decks a lot. Ugh.
Yeah, they're very brutal hard counters. When your entire deck revolves around how many Battle Cry cards you can play, little tough. But yeah, Miracle Rogue, those kind of decks, they're very fun. The Octobot obviously has massive potential. Like, even if it's not right now, that's the kind of card that can break things eventually, 100%. So yeah, definitely some cool tools. But the Paladin stuff really holds back Rogue a ton, I think.
Yeah, I think if you're at a point where you're just trying to have fun, I think the Rogue decks are pretty damn good to do that. Yeah. I think they're a lot of fun to play. But man, if Death and Taxes Paladin happens to be as popular as it is, or remains to be as popular as it is, rather, it's going to be rough. I think to play a lot of kinds of Rogue. I think a deck that we haven't talked about, because as is tradition, is like Odd Rogue. I feel like Odd Rogue we kind of just dismiss because I say we, I mean that as like a collective of the WoW community. Like after Night Tribune's Poison got nerfed, we kind of just wrote off Kingsbane and Odd. I mean, Odd Rogue is still a very, very good deck. And I think it got some potential toys to mess around with in this expansion. And I haven't seen a single Odd Rogue, but I'm interested to see how it kind of fares against stuff like that Death and Taxes Paladin.
Yeah, I've seen like one Kingsbane or a couple Kingsbane, 0 Odd. I think that like the 3-mana 4/3 pirate give you weapon +1 attack. That kind of slipped past me in the card dump. I think that card could see playing Odd Rogue. But yeah, Odd Rogue isn't like, it's not doing that well right now at all, but it's probably going to be the best option for the class moving forward. Yeah. Like with the Nitro nerf, Rogue is in a little bit of a tough position. Yeah. Not just because of the power level, but just like those main archetypes didn't get a ton of support, and now the stuff got way better. And it's the type of stuff that beats up Rogue, right? Like Call to Arms, for example. Like Paladin decks in general will just kind of farm Rogue. So Paladin's the big winner of the set. Kind of like gives a good hint of how Rogue's feeling.
All right, let's move on to talking about the biggest loser of the expansion. There was this deck that we were really excited to try, I think myself in particular, that utilized like Undertaker and some Leper Gnomes and some Mind Blasts and some Shadow 3/4s, whatever they're called. Dude, I played some Aggro Priest and I cried myself to like a 1-6 record, and I deleted the deck. We were so hyped about this deck.
Yeah.
And it's
the reason I was so hyped about it, I'm like, Dark Lair counter, and we're like 3 days in, I'm like, where's the glare? like where to go? There's not really much glare around right now. At least what I'm playing. And so yeah, the big hope for this deck was that it could fill this very specific, like hard counter niche sort of role. And if that counter isn't existing that much, like if it's not a big part of the meta, then it's not that relevant. So yeah, poor aggro priest, let it, sit back. We can remember the theory crafts, remember the good times, and not think about the times we actually played a 2-mana like 2/1 in wild.
Think about the hopes and dreams. All right, and then the last deck that we want to touch on today is Cube or Control Warlock. I know you hit rank 10 Legend last month, like as your finish with a Control Warlock. Basically cube lock that was cutting cubes for Watch Post because Watch Post was the new hot. And do you want to talk about Warlock and why it might be good?
Yeah, I mean, the thinking of Warlock was that like a lot of people playing Paladin. There was so much Paladin that last day of the season, basically, because people were trickling through. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is a new broken thing." And my thinking was, "Oh, Voidcaller and Skull, they don't care how much mana my cards cost. I will just play them, and I will get my big demons out." And so it felt like it was a solid Paladin counter. I think in hindsight, perhaps I just high rolled, like thinking about it, to get my rank, my beautiful top 10 finish. It's so beautiful for wild. But yeah, like Warlock didn't really get a ton, but it's so hard figuring out some of these matchups, right? When you're like one person and you're just playing like a handful of games against this one deck, you're kind of getting a feel for stuff. So obviously the games where I get Skull and Voidcaller, they feel fine. They feel good. But I think on average, it probably isn't the Death and Taxes counter that I might have been hoping it to be. Or at least that was like my initial impression.
Yeah, I kind of agree. Whenever you draw Voidcaller and Skull, your deck is going to feel a lot better. I played a couple games of your deck, and I did not draw the Voidcaller and Skull. And then... it was a big misplay, and then when my Dark Skies gets Oh My Yogged, I like bottom right immediately because I just kind of lose the game. I mean, it feels like Q-Block is a very good deck. I think Q-Block with birds and all that stuff, I think it's a good deck. It's going to be good against stuff like Reaner Priest and Big Priest. I don't think that it, like you said, I don't think it's the thing that's going to hold down Death and Taxes Paladin. I think that role might be Pirate Warrior or Murloc Shaman. And then we farm those decks because we have Defiled Dark Skies and Voidcaller and Skull, right? And I think that might be the role Q-Block plays rather than, or Control Warlock. I guess I keep gravitating towards cubes because that's tradition, but you kind of made a really important point that like people might just be too scared to cut cubes because it might not be good enough or too slow in our format. But that whole archetype, I think, is going to feast on the stuff that's potentially feasting on the Death and Taxes, but not feast on the Death and Taxes itself.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thinking on the cubes was that, like, one, they're battle cries, right? Like, so, like, one, they're a battle cry. 7 mana for that is pretty horrific. Or even if he gets, like, Watch Post, it's just so expensive. It's 6 mana. Yeah. You often can't pop it necessarily without, like, Plague of Flames, unless, like, you run Broomstick. But, hey, Broomstick is also a battle cry. And so it's like, why am I running this? I'd rather just, like, cut the greed as much as possible, lower the curve where I can, like getting Watch Posts and things like that. And so like what are cubes really doing? Like if you get the big demon down, you're probably doing fine against Paladin. It's not like that. It's not like Paladin's one of the aggro decks that can, easily punch through that first demon. Like it's often very tough for them to sort of deal with that compared to a lot of like other aggro decks. So yeah, cubes seemed a little excessive to me and things like that. But I don't think Control Warlock will be any better, like Control Cube, whatever you want to call it, will be any better than it really was previously. I just don't think it really got enough from the set. So I continue to think it'll just be like, it'll be fine. Like it'll be a competitive Legend viable deck, but I doubt it'll be anything too special.
Yeah. All right. So that's kind of our initial impressions talking about decks and some powerful cards, a week into the expansion. We're going to check back in next week and see, what counter to the Death and Taxes Paladin has been brewed up and surprise the metagame. Next week, because people are smart and they're going to find out counters, right? Totally. That's what it is. But check back in next week. We'll let you guys know how the meta is looking after, another week of just refinement. And now, to kind of wrap up the show, there's a couple things we want to do. Prior to the expansion coming out, Corbett and I, put our big brains to the test and, guessed our top 5 most powerful cards that were going to come out of this set. And so we just want to check in on our predictions really quick. We're going to do this, this week, next week, and maybe the week after, just to see how smart we are. Let's talk about it. So I had Injured Marauder, Firemancer Flurgle, Knight of Anointment, Outrider's Axe, and Sword of the Fallen. I am feeling pretty damn good about my top 5. And then you had Sword of the Fallen, Conviction, South Coast Chieftain, Flurgle, and Injured Marauder. I think you're also feeling pretty good about your 5, yeah?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
moral of this story, we're smart. Ignore the other parts where we were completely wrong, like Aggro Priest, and myself with the Watch Post. But can we talk about, by the way, how you did not have the guts to put this in your top 5 most powerful cards, yet you are the biggest stan of Watch Post that I've ever seen?
I couldn't do it, Meowth. I knew what was going to happen. If it turned out that Watch Post was bad and you had a fucking building as your top 5 most powerful cards, I couldn't do it. Like, I saw the potential. I really did. Damn, I really feel bad in hindsight that I didn't do it, because you know how much I wanted to. Like, I really wanted it to be on my top 5. And to be honest, though, I don't even know if it actually is in the top 5 for Wild. I actually think things like Sword of the Fallen and Conviction and Flurgle are probably objectively better cards than Watch Post right now. Like, Sword of the Fallen and Conviction, these cards are busted. Like, Sword of the Fallen in particular, nutty. Flurgle is one of the top 2 performing cards in Murloc Shaman, right there with Underbelly. Chieftain is also right there in that conversation. And Injured Marauder, you'll never get an accurate picture of Marauder because it's a recruit card, right? There's no draw and win rate stats because it's all messed up because you don't want to draw it. But it's still really busted, right? Injured Marauder comes down, you're like, holy crap, it's a 5/10. So I think Watch Post in hindsight, I'm actually happy that I didn't have it in my top 5, because I think that it's actually a more accurate picture for Wild. But it doesn't stop me from saying, hey, I knew. I knew about Watch Post. I was 100% dead on accurate. Never wrong in my life. Never wrong. Except that time I gave Ziliax 2 stars.
Ooh, I did not know about that one. You should not have brought that up, because now I'm going to bully you about that. Oh, God. Imagine thinking Ziliax.
It was on a 7-star scale as well, so it wasn't even 2 out of 5. It was 2 out of 7.
This is the guy that I co-host this podcast with, Gay. Oh, God.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap up the show. Let's talk about... There are a lot of talks in Standard right now about some busted cards, some busted decks, some broken synergies. And so Ixar has all but confirmed. So they are meeting at the beginning of this next week to talk about nerfs. And he said that there will be nerfs. And so there is stuff to look forward to, I guess. Just a couple weeks into, I guess 1 week into the expansion. You're good. Let's talk about what those potential nerfs might be. As the guy who plays the most Standard out of the two of us, do you want to talk about, what Team 5 might be looking at when it comes to Standard nerfs and how it might impact our format?
Yeah, so right now it's Standard. The format is in a super, super weird spot where Paladin is basically like Libram Paladin is basically the strongest deck that's existed since day 1 Demon Hunter. But at the same time, no one is playing it. Or it's being played, but not nearly as much as it should, because people hate playing Paladin decks. Whatever. Meanwhile, Spell Mage is the absolute hotness. Everybody's playing Spell Mage.
Cheating mana is good? Oh, no.
Yeah, everybody's playing Deck of Lunacy. And so right now, Deck of Lunacy is a very clear nerf target. It's basically confirmed, I think, that they're going to be hitting Deck of Lunacy. It's the type of card where, you're fine if it's a fun off-meta thing, but the moment it becomes a very competitive... it's fine as a Timmy card, and you don't want it to be a spike card, if you know, the Magic terminology.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Deck of Lunacy will be hit. Way too good. Probably go to 3. They might even put it up to 4, just to really make sure. Sword of the Fallen, I think it's likely that they send it to 2 durability. The Watch Posts are also likely to get hit, I would say. And then other candidates they might look at are things like Penflinger and potentially Jandis. So those are the main cards. So all the Watch Posts, maybe not the 4-mana one, but and then Penflinger, Sword of the Fallen, Deck of Lunacy, and potentially Jandis.
So yeah, so those are the nerfs. I'm a little bit disappointed to not see a couple of other cards on here. Broomstick and maybe that Refreshing Spring Water, but yeah, I mean, Standard, I think, is in a very weird spot. That I watch my Twitter feed, and every morning when I wake up, it's just people posting the stupidest screenshots where somebody had a turn 2 in a Grand Slam, I don't know how they had to turn 2 into Grand Slam with a survival of the fittest.
Oh.
But they had 2 mana. It might have been like post Celestial Alignment or something, but it.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know what happened. But it was the weirdest thing to wake up to, where there's 4 11 15s coming down. It was dumb. And then of course, like we got to talk about Broomstick. I'm gonna talk about Broomstick every time they talk about nerfs because I want that stupid stick broken in half. I hate the card. But it doesn't look like, I think you were talking about, it's not even being played in standard right now.
No, there's such little minion combat right now in standard. Because like the 3-mana watch post, it just doesn't let you play minions, right? So like a lot of decks like Zoo, for example, they're just like completely pushed out. Any sort of like Rush Warrior and things like that, completely pushed out. Outrider's Axe is not doing anything in standard at all because nobody plays stuff. It's so weird, right, with the Spell Mage. And it's just a very weird spot. And so Broomstick isn't doing anything. It's also, the extra funny part about this is that like the whole expansion theme is about Frenzy and about minion combat and surviving like for one turn, making trades. And then the entire format has devolved into who plays Deck of Lunacy on 2 into like massive spell cheating and things like that. Very, very weird stuff going on.
Classic peak Hearthstone is what you're telling me is going on over there.
Absolutely, yeah. The interesting thing about Deck of Lunacy is that the card's always actually been broken in this archetype. There's been like, I just figured I'd address it because like I saw some mention that like, oh, with rotation, Deck of Lunacy is nuts. It's like, no, Deck of Lunacy's actually always been broken in this deck. Like it's always had a very, very insane mulligan win rate for the deck. It's just like the deck sucked, and now it doesn't suck because of things like refreshing mana and other decks that beat it getting pushed out because like things like Zoo or like very aggressive minion based stuff just isn't seeing play right now. And so the deck got better, other stuff got worse with the rotation. Deck of Lunacy as a card itself didn't really change. It's always been a potential nerf target if this deck ever actually became good.
Rest in peace, Raffles RNG Mage. Getting hit.
Oh,
collateral
no.
damage for the standard.
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
Did you see Raffle had the 6 months ago? He had the Death and Taxes Paladin.
I did see that. Raffle is he has the biggest brain out of everybody in the WoW format. Confirmed.
That's true.
He can see the future. Raffle also, I feel like, is very much a Death and Taxes kind of person in Magic too. So I think he's totally okay with Death and Taxes Paladin being a thing. I'm talking for him like he's, I know exactly everything about him. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of disappointed to see nerfs coming so soon, but I'm also kind of glad to see nerfs coming so soon, so that we actually have a picture of what the WoW metagame is going to be, kind of moving forward, so that we can kind of adapt from there. But yeah, I mean. Let's wrap it up the show with one last question for you, Corbett. What is your, how are you feeling 1 week into Forge to the Barrens? Are you enjoying the format?
Yeah, I'd say yes. Like it feels very different.
Yeah,
is the thing
for sure.
And so the novelty is sort of just still there. I'm a little bit sad that I feel like I can't play some of the decks that I would like to, just because of the type of decks that push it out. Like things like, I'd really like to play Miracle Rogue more. That was really fun for me day one. And now I'm kind of like, I feel like I can't really play that. But at the same time, it's wild. There's always going to be something that feels like I can't play, because there's always going to be like broken stuff, whether it's Secret Mage stopping me from playing Miracle Druid or something like that, right? There's always something. So overall though, I would say I am enjoying it. The format feels very weird and novel. I get to play Miracle Mage and make Meowth tilt out of his mind, so that's fun. And so overall, big plus so far. And I'm also looking forward to what happens when they do make nerfs, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it is kind of cool having this Paladin deck with Sword of the Fallen, but I will be curious to see what happens if they do touch the Post and Penflinger as well, right? Like maybe they touch Penflinger and we can see what that does. But yeah, so far it's been cool. I've enjoyed it.
If they nerf Penflinger to only hit minions, how drastically does that hurt Darkglare?
Well, I mean, we're not playing it in Darkglare, right? We're not playing it in Priest. It's hard to say exactly. Like, I think Darkglare could probably handle it decently well. Like, I think Penflinger is actually not that big of a deal in Darkglare if it got hit. I think it can actually handle it pretty well. Out of all the cards in Darkglare to get nerfed, I think Penflinger is actually one of the weaker candidates. Like, I think that could brush it off pretty easily.
All right. Okay. Sorry, I just had a thought about that.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
you're fine.
just building off of that, like off of what you've said, I have actually very much enjoyed playing Hearthstone because of that same like novelty factor, right? On nerfs with the new expansion, that's kind of like flipped on its head, where like Darkler is no longer the deck to beat right now. It's kind of insane, and I've been enjoying. I've been playing a lot of off meta jank. I don't really want to call it off meta, but I've been playing stuff like Odd Demon Hunter with like a Death Rattle focus, and I've been playing some Even Hunter, and I've been playing Even Mage. I've been playing a lot of these more off meta stuff, right? And I've been having a ton of success, and it's like,
Yeah.
so I don't know if that's just a side effect of like people experimenting with stuff, but I've been beating a lot of the meta stuff. I think there's just been a breath of fresh air that's been breathed into the format, where it's just like a lot of archetypes just feel better to play. And that like I talked about last week, there's more stuff to play, right? There's a lot more viable decks, I feel like, now with the new expansion and the unnerfs, which is great. And more decks to play, the better for whatever kind of player that you are. So I've really enjoyed the expansion. I'm having a ton of fun. Normally I burn myself out like the first week of an expansion because I stream for like 6 to 8 hours for like 4 or 5 straight days, and I've done that this expansion, and I feel great, and I'm looking forward to playing more Hearthstone tomorrow. So I'm excited.
Yeah, I've also been doing like a lot more streaming, like much longer streams recently. So it's been fun. Yeah, I've enjoyed it, and we'll probably just keep doing that as well.
Yeah. So, great segue. If you guys want to check out some of our content live, Corbett, where will they find you?
You can find me at Corbettgames on Twitch and Twitter and YouTube content, things like that. So yeah, all that kind of stuff is there at Corbettgames. So thank you guys very much for listening or watching.
Yeah, guys, make sure you check out his YouTube content. Totally not biased here, but his content is pretty great. But yeah, I appreciate all of you guys for tuning into the podcast. Just a reminder, if you guys want to listen on the go, make sure you guys check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all your podcast distributors. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you guys next week, when we talk about how the meta has completely changed. All right, and we hope you guys are enjoying the expansion. Take care.